If the world's overpopulated, why do you have so many children?
Alright guys, Papa Pepper once again just out here harvesting more of the toothache plant because there's a lot of it. Definitely going to have, hopefully, more than I'll ever need this winter. We'd be in some serious issues if we needed it all, even with a family our size. And that's kind of part I want to talk about, is just a family our size. Because there's a common belief out there in the world that the world's overpopulated. And then a common question that comes out of that is, well, Papa Pepper, if the world's so overpopulated already, why do you have so many children? Why are you having so many kids if the world's overpopulated? And honestly, looking back in life, I never wanted kids. Looking back in life, I was actually hoping to be dead by 30. And I think part of that was just I lived for fun, I lived for partying. Thankfully never caught any, tragic diseases with all the things I was into. Thankfully never permanently fried out my brain with all the drugs I did and things like that. But I never wanted kids, was hoping to be dead by 30. I think part of that whole dead by 30 thing was, I wouldn't mind outliving some people like, Kurt Cobain or Jim Morrison or others. But by the time you hit 30, I think I had this mindset that I was supposed to accomplish something by then, and I didn't really want to. I didn't really see that I was going to actually, probably. So I was just hoping, if I'm dead by then I don't got to worry about much. I got to have my fun, I got to do whatever, and now it can be done and over with. And at the time, I never really wanted any children, and part of it was just that I believed the world was such a wicked, terrible, evil place. Who would want to bring children into that type of environment? And that obviously is a view that people can have. And the part that makes me wonder is, well, if all the people who kind of were aware of all the bad things in the world decided that they didn't want to have children, who would be the only people having children? It would actually be all the people who didn't care. All the people who weren't really concerned. Who just, for a lack of whatever reason, just, who cares? And they go and have a bunch of kids. And if you think about that, what would that make the world within a couple years? How would it be? So back in those days, I didn't even want a wife. I certainly was in relationships, but I certainly didn't want a wife, didn't want to marry, didn't want kids. And then I met Mama Pepper. When I met Mama Pepper, I not only met her, and I was absolutely terrified of her when I met her, because I knew I could really go for her. And if you really are going to go for somebody, if you're really going to have some feelings, then you're really going to have a potential to get hurt. Now, I had been hurt before, and it was much easier for me at the time just to stay drunk, to stay high, to pretty much use women and not care. So I was terrified of Mama Pepper because I knew I could really go for her, and I did not want to be hurt. So in the process of trying to love one another, we actually walked into a church to get married, heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. I understood that, I always thought there was one true creator, God, because a bunch of conflicting ideas about who God is didn't make sense, like they can't all be true. And the whole evolutionary, nothing exploded and, we're highly evolved pond scum, never made sense to me either. I know it's convenient. I know people like to say it. I know that if they believe it, then they can say that their actions never matter, and you can do whatever you want all life long, and it'll never matter. And I think that that's kind of part of why people really enjoy that worldview. But so in the process of trying to love one another, we found someone to love more than each other. And because of some things I encountered, I realized God didn't want me just drunk and high and promiscuous, that he wanted me to live a different life. And I told him, look, I cannot live a different life. I don't know life not drunk. I don't know life not high. It's kind of who I am. It's part of my identity. And, he pretty much promised that he could change me if I let him. And I said, well, if you want me different, you're going to have to change me. And that's part of why, actually, that is why I'm sober these days. That's why it's been about a decade now since I've had any drugs, any alcohol, any of that. And before I couldn't live without it. Now I've got a lifetime supply because I don't need any. And I'll tell you what, it is rather liberating, it is rather freeing. I was terrified at first because I didn't know sober life. I didn't know life without those things, and I didn't want it anymore. I mean, since the time I was a big kid and like 17, 18, I was always messed up, and I wasn't really familiar with the world unless I was on drugs and alcohol. So at that point in my life, I pretty much turned it over to the Lord. I decided I'm going to live a different life. I'm going to let Him kind of choose how I live. And one of the things that He claims to be, that the God of the Bible claims to be, is the author of life. And it says that in there. So to me, if I'm going to say, this is the man who made, this is the God who made me, the one who made me, and this is the one who's redeemed me, the one who's changed my entire existence, this is the one who really dictates how my life is going to be and allows me the freedom to choose His way over my own way, and therefore by really just submitting to His wisdom, His intelligence, His revelation, that my life would be better than I could ever come up with it on my own. In my freedom, it's best for me to be free to obey Him. So as the author of life, one thing that I believe is that I should let Him author. If He's going to be the author of life, then I should give Him the opportunity to author. If He wants to choose to bless our family with another child, then I'm going to let Him at least have the opportunity to do so. And I know that that's contrary to a lot of things. A lot of times these days in the world, people, they view children as a curse. They view children as a burden, as something that cramps their finances, cramps their freedom, cramps their style. And that's absolutely true. If you want to live for yourself, and you want to spend all your money on yourself, and you want to die, alone, and you don't want to leave a legacy, then absolutely, kids are a huge cramp on your style. They're a cramp on your finances. They're a cramp on your freedom. There's a lot of investment and pain and sorrow, and even I would say suffering sometimes, just trying to teach them and train them to obey and to be those who would choose to do the right thing. That takes a lot of effort. So if we get back to the fact that a lot of people believe, okay, so there's a fact that a lot of people believe the world is overpopulated. I'm personally not of that persuasion. Now, I haven't done the math myself, but I heard that if you packed the entire world's population into the state of Texas, it would be about as densely populated as Paris, France. And people choose to live in Paris, France. So there's obviously a lot of people who don't mind it being that densely populated. Now, we can talk about the limited resources of this earth, but if you think about it, are we really at the point where we can't be proper stewards of this earth in the way that it could take care of everyone in this earth? I understand there's a lot of unusable parts of the earth, as far as you can't grow food in a volcano or raise livestock there, but personally, I don't buy it. Personally, people can say what they want. Personally, I think there's a whole agenda to reduce the world's population, to convince people that we're such a plague to the environment that something must be done to eliminate man, or the whole world's going to be destroyed. And there's a lot of things like that people believe. There's a lot of things like that people say. And personally, they can choose whether or not to believe that. I just choose not to. And I have my reasons for doing so. And one small thing that I would suggest people consider and think about as they even just evaluate what I share here, as they evaluate this general idea, is why are humans putting such a strain on the environment? I'm not saying there's not things like pollution. I'm not saying there's not things like incredible, horrible, filthy areas where people just generate a ton of garbage, where it looks filthy and nasty, where you've got homeless people pooping on the street in front of you, where these things are happening. And if you compare that, think for a minute. If somebody lives in a giant city, for the most part, because of all of the zoning laws and the rules and the regulations, a lot of their freedoms or things that they could otherwise do are restricted to the point that they must be a consumer. They have no other opportunity to really be providing for themselves. So therefore, they'll do things like rent for life. They'll do things like have to buy every bit of food that they ever buy. They do things like they never own land in their entire life, and they're not free to have any animal that's going to benefit them in milk, eggs, or meat. They can have cats or dogs or goldfish or things like this, but as far as if it benefits them in milk, meat, or eggs, they're not going to be able to have it. And they're not really going to be able to grow a lot of their own food. They could do microgreens or some other things, in their apartments, or potted plants on the balcony, or different things. But for the most part, they're very dependent. When you're very dependent, everything that you have must come from somewhere else. For me to walk out to my garden and pluck a bell pepper off of a plant from a seed I grew myself, and I'll save the seeds to plant next year, and I'll eat that bell pepper. The energy that I took is just taking a walk. Okay, the effort is very minimal. My effect on the environment in doing so is almost non-existent if you think about it. Now, if you buy a green pepper, a bell pepper, at the store, say you head down to your local store, first of all, you're probably going to drive there. So, you're using up all that fossil fuel or whatever, and then when you get there, there's paying for the lights of the building, there's paying for the employees, there's a lot of things, the employees had to drive there, all this stuff. The pepper itself, who knows if it's genetically modified, who knows what chemicals and chemical fertilizers, chemical pesticides, stuff it was exposed to. Then, it may have been covered in wax, picked prematurely so it'd survive, covered in wax to hold its shape, put on a little styrofoam tray next to a couple other peppers, maybe a yellow one and a red one next to it, wrapped in a shrink wrap, put a sticker on it, okay? So by the time load it on a truck at some warehouse, shipped across the country, or maybe from a different country, and then unloaded, then finally put on the thing where they sit there in a little pre-cooled environment, and you're able to go pick them up. Then you eat it, you throw out what could be composted, and it goes to the landfill. You take your sticker on the top of it, your little styrofoam tray, your little plastic shrink wrap, and that all goes to the landfill. And the best thing that we've got to do with these garbage these days is that we just bury it. We make a giant pit, we turn it into a giant mountain, and then we bury it for future generations. And they get a hill with a park with a couple of pipes sticking out of it. I don't know. Now, if you look at that, that is a choice. That is a choice. I used to live that way. I chose to live that way. These days I choose to live a different way. Now, I'm not choosing to live this way to save the environment. I'm not choosing to live this way to, justify me having whatever kids God gives me. I'm not choosing to live this way for those reasons. It's just that there are certain things I want to accomplish in life that this lifestyle seems like it's going to be the most beneficial and the path to that destination. I wouldn't mind living out my life with my wife when I saw her for multiple hours on a daily basis, and that we had our children involved in our lives too. If the kids are off at school and then they're extracurricular activities, if mom's off at work and I'm off at work, and we have empty houses that we never see each other, that's not the life I want. Where if things really hit the fan, we have no food, we have no heat, we have no anything, and we're pretty much checkmate, endgame, you're all dead. That's not the situation that I want to live in. So again, if I back this up to the original thing, if the world is so overpopulated, why do you have so many kids? First of all, I don't think I have that many kids. I will have every child that God wants me to have, and if any through horrible, tragic situations get taken away, then I'll deal with that too. So far, we haven't got a single one we would send back. And again, if I can raise kids with just an understanding of this world, I think that their influence in the world and their opportunity to educate and inform others is going to be, incredible. And 2 children can get done a lot more than 1 kid can. 5 kids like we have right now can accomplish a lot more than 2 kids can. My children are a blessing. That's something that God has said. That's something that I'm convinced of, and that's something that we're raising them to be. You can believe that your children are a curse if you want, but there's going to be consequences of that mindset, and I would be very careful if that's the choice you make. And secondly, I don't think that the world is overpopulated. I don't think that the world can't sustain our life. I think that it cannot sustain a lot of people's lifestyles if they continue on the way that they are. And also, don't worry if you think the world's overpopulated. First of all, people barely reproduce these days. Second of all, there's a lot of things that I think are in the works to make sure that that everyone does get cancer, that everyone does suffer a whole lot and then die. Look at the Georgia Guidestones. Look at other things. Look at things that people like Ted Turner or I hear a hummingbird. Like Ted Turner or Bill Gates have said. Trust me, they're working on reducing the world's population anyway. Not having kids isn't really going to be the issue, and I think there's a lot of effort also to sterilize people. So, don't worry. If they're sterilizing a lot of people through a variety of means, we won't have to worry about people having kids anyway, right? So anyway, that's a little rant. I've still got some more of this bush to harvest. I mean, this is a lot. If I ate those all at once, I don't even know what happened. Crazy toothache plant, enjoying it. All right, pop out.
As always, I'm Papa Pepper, and I'd like to remind you, don't post for free. If you'd like to be part of a revolution in social media, an economic power to the people where users can actually blog for cryptocurrency, then I'd recommend that you check out steemit.com and join the revolution. Papa out.